lovelies, and welcome back to what may in fact be one of the last Ages of Chaos for quite a while, because barring one or two little dribs and drabs, barring some of the more abstruse materials out there, like the Liber Chaotica, for example, we're pretty much up to date now. We're pretty much present day. We've gone over most of the major installments to Chaos as an army in both 40k, Fantasy Battle, Age of Sigmar. There are a few exceptions. There's a few bits and pieces, like, for example, there's the updates that have come for the various books in Age of Sigmar. So you've had recently the Khorne Bloodbound. They've come back, or the Blades of Khorne as they've become now. They are now the Blades of Khorne. And all that's really happened with the Blades of Khorne, they've just taken the core stuff from the first two books that have that name, and they've just updated them for the present circumstances. So obviously Khorne forces cannot have magicians, wizards, spellcasters, and that's a bit of a pity in the current circumstances, because we are in sort of the post-Necroquake world. There are wild spells ranging around, there are epic spells and all sorts of things, and technically, the Disciples of Khorne, or rather the Blades of Khorne, are kind of left out of that. So to combat that, what the designers have done is actually really clever. They've essentially created their own sort of kind of magic system for Khorne. They've characterized Khorne forces the sort as more like druidic and shamanistic, more clerical almost than the spellcasters in other armies. So you don't have wizards. You have clerics of Khorne. You have various different entries that act as priests of Khorne, and the priests of Khorne actually have their entire own kind of casting system, if you like, which essentially allows them to create not magical, but miraculous, darkly miraculous effects on the battlefield. They can call on Khorne in various ways and perform rituals so that Khorne intercedes on their behalf, and it's actually really clever. It works very, very well. They also have the equivalent of epic spells, which is, they're called Khornate Phenomena. So you can actually have, and they're actually really good. They're really, really good. Beautiful models that wander around the battlefield, causing carnage in a very magical manner, but not. Let's, we don't want to insult the blood god. It's not magic. It's miracles. It's dark miracles when it comes to Khorne. And they're basically things like skulls that drip blood and that kind of thing. And they're lots of fun. It's a really, really good book. All the background is pretty much the same as it was in the previous Khorne Bloodbound books. There's a few new instances that tell you how the tribes of Khorne are coping in the aftermath of the Necroquake. There's a bit more involving how Archaon and the Slaves to Darkness interact with them, which is again kind of fun. It's a good book. It's a good book. We've also had updated recently the Disciples of Tzeentch. The Disciples of Tzeentch were one of my, as you may have guessed if you've watched the previous videos, one of my favourite books in all of AOS. The updated one is even better. All it does, takes the Disciples of Tzeentch, gives them a bit of a shot in the arm. It just updates and tweaks a few tiny little details, nothing much, nothing that significant really. The background is still pretty much as it was. It updates the army-wide special rule with the fate dice, which is a brilliant thing. The fate dice system is great. I love it so much, and they should introduce it into 40k for the Thousand Sons. My God, should they? My God, should they? 9th edition, fingers crossed. Thousand Sons, fate dice. Yes, that's what we need. It just means you roll 9 dice at the beginning of the battle, and at any point in the battle, you can substitute certain kinds of rolls for one of the rolls that you get from your fate dice. And there are ways of replenishing those fate dice. It's really cool. It's a really cool, characterful way of doing things. There are also lots more individual battalions and detachments and different types of Tzeentch army, which is fun, that represent the different cults of Tzeentch and the different circles of Tzeentch's demons, which is really, really good fun. Beyond that, there's also the introduction of the endless spells, the epic spells, which is great. The Zeech ones are brilliant, actually. The Zeech ones are not only fantastic in terms of their models, but the way they work as well. The Tome of Zeech, the book, the fiery book with all the eyes on it, my god, that is fantastic. It is absolutely fantastic. Zeech armies are really good in AOS now, and I mean really bloody good. Not quite as good as the Hedonites of Slanesh, but then what is? There's not much that is outside of the Ossiarch Bone Reapers, you know? One thing that did happen, which I found hilarious, they had to tone down the Hedonites of Slanesh. The Hedonites of Slanesh were basically dominating AOS battlefields, so they had to do an errata where they upped some of the points costs, they downplayed some of the more abusable elements of that army list, because the Hedonites of Slanesh, man, they were doing the business. They really were, and they still are. They also introduced a very nice thing in the White Dwarf. There was a new addition to the Hedonites of Slanesh, based around however you pronounce it, Slesk, or however you pronounce it, the part mortal, part not demonic coupling from the Hedonites of Slanesh book. So you can now have different armies that represent the more mortal-centric aspects of the Hedonites of Slanesh, which is really nice. That's really cool. They need to introduce that into the book. That would be nice. But yeah, it's good. It's all good. We also had the introduction of the Everchosen book, which is also very, very good. The Everchosen book basically represents a particular narrative campaign where the Varan Spire, the All Points, the Fortress of Archaon, which sits at the very nexus of all reality, is being assaulted by the legions of the Ossiarch Bone Reapers and the Nighthaunts of Nagash. Apparently, Catacross and Archaon, they had a bit of a spat beforehand, a long time ago, and Archaon kind of beat him up a little bit. You know, Catacross, the undefeated, in quotation marks, you know, got roundly slapped about by Archaon and Dorgar, roundly slapped about. So Catacross decides he's going to attack the Varan Spire. Meanwhile, Archaon has found where Slanesh is. Archaon has actually emerged into Ulgish, the point that exists between the realms of Shadow and the realms of Light, Ulgu and Sheish, which is called Ulgish, which is where Slanesh is bound. And he's trying to free Slanesh. He actually knows where he is. And there's a lovely little narrative bit in the Everchosen book where Archaon and Slanesh are talking to one another. And it's great. Slanesh talks to Archaon like a lost lover. He's like sort of purring and trying to seduce him. And Archaon, I really like the new characterization of Archaon. He's not just this rabid zealot anymore. He actually doesn't like the Chaos Gods very much. The new write-up for Archaon in the Everchosen book, rather the Slaves to Darkness book, and in the Everchosen book, points out that Archaon actually doesn't really like the Chaos Gods very much. He doesn't like gods in general. He's actually working towards a point where humanity doesn't bow to gods at all. He's actually trying to end the time of gods in the mortal realms. He doesn't like them very much. There's something kind of to be said for that, is there not? So he basically regards the Chaos Gods as just means to an end. They're instruments to him, basically. And he responds to Slanesh by basically saying, "Oh, shut up. Stop being so ridiculous, or I'll just leave you here." And it's like the hubris of this guy. He is very much becoming the AOS equivalent of Abaddon, you know? Abaddon's like this too. Abaddon is not some pawn or instrument of the gods. It's kind of the other way around. The emphasis is shifting in the same way that it did between the Necrons and the Catan, you know? Initially, the Catan were the masters and the Necrons were the slaves. Now it's the other way around. And that seems to be the emphasis that's happening with the Chaos characters as well. And I kind of love that. It gives them their own motivation, it gives them their own impetus, and I kind of love that. We also had, I don't know whether I've spoken about it thus far. I don't know whether I've spoken about it yet, but we had the Vigilus books, obviously. In 40k, we had the Vigilus books. Vigilus was basically what happened after Cadia. It's a little update for 8th edition that introduces an entirely new narrative campaign around the world of Vigilus, where, for reasons, basically almost all of the forces in 40k are converging. Abaddon, of course, is trying to destroy it because it represents a stronghold in this sort of passage between Imperium Nihilus and Imperium whateverus, Secundus or whatever it's called. All the other forces are there for reasons. There's no real reason for them to be there, but what this did is it introduced lots of new models. It introduced the new Abaddon miniature. Abaddon's been updated at long last, and it also allowed for the Chaos forces in 40k to be massively updated. So we actually got a Chaos Space Marines Codex 2.0 for 8th edition, or 8.5 if you like, and it's really good. It's actually really good. It introduces lots of new stuff. We've got not only the new miniatures, like the new Dark Apostle miniature, we've actually got new additions to the HQ units in 40k. So we've got the Lord Discordant, and by the way, after the introduction of the Lord Discordant, my god, Chaos armies have been dominated by that guy because he's insane. He's so cool. He's basically a Dark Mechanicus miniature. He is a corrupted kind of tech priest on the back of a giant spidery demon engine with lots of legs and tendrils and proboscis and things. He's very, very, very nice indeed. On the battlefield, insane. I mean, like, this guy goes toe-to-toe with Demon Princes, and in certain configurations, maybe even with Demon Primarchs, he is a bad dude. He can take down, like, he's such a threat to enemy vehicles. Such an insane threat to enemy vehicles. And he also very beautifully bolsters demon engines around himself. I mean, demon engines have always gotten short shrift, despite the fact they're big, lovely kits that are expensive and which you'd think Games Workshop want to sell. They've always been given short shrift. They've never really done what they're supposed to do. They've never been destructive enough. The Lord Discordant makes them so. There's also a lovely detachment in the Vigilus book, the second Vigilus book, that makes them more interesting. It really gives demon engines a bit of an oomph, a shot in the arm. There's also the new Dark Apostle miniature. Ooh, that's a gorgeous Chaos miniature if ever there was one. New Dark Apostle with lots of lovely new prayers to the Chaos gods. So now, instead of just having the one prayer that he can chant or a handful of prayers, there's a whole list of the things, which is lovely. Absolutely lovely. We also have the oh, what's he called? There's the other new Chaos edition. He's basically like a headhunter for Chaos. He goes around taking the heads of enemy champions and things, and he's quite fun too. I mean, he's not as interesting as some of the others. He's just not. The Vigilus book also introduced, as well as lots of lovely new detachments for Chaos armies to sort of theme them, which is lovely. It also gave us the Fallen. It gave us a Fallen detachment, and also entries and stratagems and artifacts for some of the Renegade chapters, like the Red Corsair, not the Red, yeah, the Red Corsairs, and the Scourge and the Purge and all of those guys. The Crimson Slaughter. Really cool. It's really nice to see them getting a bit of attention and for them to play in a way that's significantly different from everything else. Hopes, fingers crossed, my loves, for 9th Ed. Fingers crossed that in 9th Ed we get what the Imperial Space Marines are getting, which is the ability to just basically create your own Renegade chapters. Oh, fingers crossed. Your own warbands, essentially. We need a system that allows you to create your own warbands. I can't imagine they won't. I really can't imagine they won't. Because the Necrons have got it, the Imperial Space Marines have got it, so I don't understand why the Chaos Space Marines wouldn't have it as well. Anywho, Vigilus, really good book. Abaddon, really beautiful miniature. However, The one that really got everyone excited was War of the Spider, the Psychic Awakening book War of the Spider, because Psychic Awakening War of the Spider reintroduces everyone's favourite eugenicist into the 40k universe, Fabulous Bill himself. And actually, you know, Kirioth called this, by the way. John, Kirioth called this on one of his videos. Because we got the mention of the new Psychic Awakening but War of the Spider, and he said in one of his videos that, well, who else could it be but Fabius Bile? And you know, people were kind of like, oh, it could be lots of things, and sadly, you know, he did kind of retract. He sort of backtracked on that, but he was right. He was so right. Kirioth called it, man. It is about Fabius Bile. It's Fabius Bile being reintroduced into the 40k universe with a brand spanking new rule set, a new narrative campaign, and at long last, a new miniature. My god, that Fabius Bile miniature, the one that we've been using up until this point, up until the introduction of the new one, it's been around since I first got into 40k, when I was a kid, way back in second ed. It was great at the time, but my god, it's an old lead miniature. God, it's ailing. It's ailing a lot. But the new miniature is fantastic. Oh my god. I pre-ordered it, and I pre-ordered the book as well, because Fabius Bile, Fabulous Bill, is one of my favourite characters in 40k, and it's lovely to see him introduced and updated here. Actually, War of the Spider gave me more than I anticipated. Narratively, it's one of the best of the Psychic Awakening books, because it's just loads of fun. It's Fabius Bile being really unpleasant, as is his wont. He is basically, he's annoyed the Death Guard because he's stolen a sacred relic of Nurgle that he wants to use for his various eugenic experiments. So Typhus, the harbinger of Nurgle, the arch messiah of Nurgle, and the first company of the Death Guard are now chasing him across the galaxy, and Fabius Bile isn't that concerned because he's so arrogant like that. Basically, Fabius he's retreated to what's left of Cadia, and he's found one of the lesser war bands associated with the Black Legion that's basically just a renegade chapter hanging around there trying to carve out its own empire. And he's nabbed them. He's basically manipulated them into becoming his genetically altered slaves so he can throw them at the Death Guard. And the Adeptus Custodes and the Assassin guilds are now involved as well. It's crazy. It's a bit of a mess, this battle. It's loads of fun because Fabius doesn't care. He just carries on with his experiments whilst all of this is going on, and he basically says, you know what, they'll fight one another, they'll exhaust one another eventually. They can't possibly comprehend what I'm doing, and what I'm doing is way more important than what they're doing. So I'll just get on with it, and that's what he does. And basically, he kind of gets away with it. It's hilarious. It's absolutely hilarious. He's got this really sardonic kind of these idiotic children playing around at their silly little war games. That's his attitude. And it kind of suits him well. He gets away with what he wants in the end. Typhus is not happy. Typhus isn't happy by the end of this. No one's happy except for Fabulous Bill. Fabulous Bill is very happy by the end of this, but no one else is. But the book, in terms of rules, it includes loads of stuff. You've got, on the Imperium side, you've got updates for the Adeptus Custodes. You've got just tons of stuff, loads of new stratagems. You've got different, like, shield hosts of the Adeptus Custodes, all of which have different rules. You've got updates for the Sisters of Silence. You've got updates for their cadres. You've got Sisters of Silence stratagems. It's just insane the amount of stuff that's going on in here. The assassins get a massive boost in the arm with all new profiles and army list entries and stratagems. The Death Guard, my god, do you get the impression that Games Workshop really love the Death Guard? They get tons of stuff in this. Not only do they have universal special rules that bring them up to date with all the other Space Marine armies in the game, like Malicious Volleys and Hateful Assault and whatnot. They get new relics, they get new stratagems, like several pages full of new stratagems, and they get they get rules for plague companies, and they get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. They get 9 new plague companies, all of which have new warlord traits, background, new relics, and new stratagems to represent the variations of forces that exist within the Death Guard, and they're loads of fun. It's brilliant. Also, we get what I did not expect. The Agents of Bile army list. Now, Fabius Bile's always had a difficult place in the Chaos Space Marine Legions because he's always been kind of an outlier. He doesn't serve the Chaos Gods. He doesn't really fit with any one army. He doesn't really hang around with any one force over much before moving on because he tends to get on their nerves, you know? He tends to make enemies rather quickly, does Fabulous Bill. So this introduces an entirely new army list exclusively for the Agents of Bile. So you can create your own twisted, genetically altered, surgically transformed creations from the base Chaos Space Marine army list if you include Fabulous Bill. It's wonderful. You get loads of stuff. There's a new entry list for Fabius himself, which is great. You get new keywords, you get new abilities, like overarching abilities for the army, which is fantastic. New relics, new stratagems. It's actually really good and a wonderful new take on the Chaos Space Marines that makes Fabius Bile something that wee bit more interesting because he alters the entire structure of your army now, rather than just being a character that you include. And in and of himself, he's actually a really good character. He's not like Abaddon or Typhus, who are beat sticks. He's a buffing character. You know, he enhances your army, and he's really good in that regard. He's actually really good and really survivable. The new miniature's great. This is one of my favourite of the Psychic Awakening books. It's really, really, really good fun. And probably the last entry for a little while in the Ages of Chaos, my loves, but not for very long because we've already had an inkling of what's coming in 9th Ed, and the Death Guard are going to be one of the first wave of codices. So when that one comes out, there'll be a new entry, my loves. I'll also going to be taking a look at some of the sort of ancillary publications in between now and then. So I will have a look at the Liber Chaotica because the Liber Chaotica are just fabulous books. I mean, those of you who have read the Liber Chaotica, the Liber Chaotica are, I'll talk about it in the video, but they are amazing. Absolutely amazing books. Until then, my loves, bye-bye.